This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Fantasy Fanalysts podcast. We are now in week 14 as the season continues to fly by. Another wild week in week 13. Nick, how was your fantasy week?
Terrible. Just terrible. Just terrible. It honestly was probably my worst week of the year, if I had to be honest. I just could not catch a break. I ran what I thought was a real solid FanDuel lineup. It wasn't. Michael Pittman, once again, did not come through for me. I had Darren Waller in all of my lineups, and then I took him out before to try to go cheaper and go big at receiver because I punted on running backs. I expected Devontae Booker to have a good week because he was going to get the opportunity. He did not. I hoped Nyheim Hines would have had a good week. He did not. I got burned. I got burned this week.
He did get a touchdown, though, didn't
he? Yeah, but he only put up like 10 points. Like he really didn't do anything even with the touchdown. It just was not a good week, and I went big at receiver going with DK Metcalf and Tyreek Hill, and it didn't work out. DK didn't play all that well. He played all right. Like he just didn't put up big fantasy numbers.
How do you feel about that Tyreek Hill touchdown that wasn't a touchdown?
Yeah, that one upset me too.
A couple of them, actually.
It wasn't a touchdown. That was a touchdown that he had.
There was the one that he actually caught that was called a complete.
Right.
And then there was the one that was just called back where he did the backflip in the end zone.
Right, yes. It was rough. I mean, and then in my yearly fantasy league, after winning, I think 7 straight weeks, I finally lost a week. I had 193 points put up on me.
Yeesh.
Yeah, so that one hurt a little bit. I mean, I am locked in to my division championship. He is in my division. He is in second place in the division, but he can't catch me. He can't. So I don't have to worry about that. I have the division locked down. I'm guaranteed playoff spot, but I would have liked to see me try to catch the number 1 seed, which probably won't happen now. But such is life in fantasy football. And you pick yourself up, move on into the next week. It sucks, but it is what it is. Yeah. I had a tough week. But how was your week?
Not great, but not as bad as yours. I had a pretty nice FanDuel week, even though I didn't finish the top. I won my matchups for my hybrid league. And just put up a pretty good output overall. My actual ESPN Fantasy League is the one that got ugly with thanks to Justin Herbert and Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, Herbert also killed me.
But yeah, Terry McLaurin right now it's in the second. As we're recording this, is in the second quarter, and he's not doing too hot. Only has 14 yards receiving. But yeah, Justin Herbert really killed me this week, and I was supposed to have the win this week, and just after that output. It wasn't nice. And I had Ruggs on my bench.
Ouch.
Although it was all off one play. But
It was entirely one play. And it was a nuts play, but it was entirely one play. But, I mean, that one play won some people some matchups or won some people some money in FanDuel. I'm more upset with myself that I took Darren Waller out of all of my FanDuel lineups than anything else. That one hurt, like, big time.
Yeah. For me, my MVPs were Gesicki and Montgomery. Only the rest of my lineup would.
I also didn't listen to myself. I didn't listen to myself this week. I said last week that you got to start David Montgomery going up against. He's picking it up. He had a 100-yard game the week prior, and he's got the Lions defense, and they can't stop anybody on the run against the run. So throw David Montgomery in. He'll be cheap, and he'll probably get you a ton of points. And he did, and I didn't take my own advice. So
yeah,
kind of burned myself there, and I deserve that one. But
and for me, the one time I decided to play Derrick Henry, he decides he doesn't want to be matchup proof anymore.
Derrick Henry was a rough play this week. He was super expensive. I couldn't justify it. I couldn't do it.
I wanted to get one of Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook in my lineup. I was like, Derrick Henry is safe, but I feel like Dalvin Cook is higher ceiling, but he's also more expensive. So I can fit Derrick Henry. I can't fit Dalvin Cook. Let's do Derrick Henry. And then it just didn't work. Eckler, I thought was going to have a better game. He didn't. Am I the only one that didn't get the memo about Tua starting? Because I totally thought Ryan Fitzpatrick was starting, or else I would not have played Devontae Parker.
I actually thought the same thing about Ryan Fitzpatrick up until game day when I saw a tweet. Oh. And I think it might have been a tweet where Tua Tagovailoa's agent accidentally leaked out that he was going to be at the game to watch Tua play. Brian Flores was keeping it a secret that who the starting quarterback was going to be. He was keeping a secret from the media to keep the other team off balance and catch him off guard.
Because I totally would not start Devontae Parker with Tua starting. Knowing what Devontae Parker does with Tua.
Absolutely not. You don't start Devontae Parker if Tua is a starter. If Ryan Fitzpatrick's a starter, you run Devontae Parker. But once I saw that tweet that the agent of Tua Tagovailoa accidentally let it leak, and then he edited the tweet real quick, but it was caught. Once I saw that, I took Devontae Parker out of my lineups. So I just happened to be in the right place on my Twitter feed at the right time. Because I also had Devontae Parker in there.
Yeah,
I almost ran Fitzpatrick and Parker in at the same time.
Ooh, that would have been rough.
I know. But I took that stack out. And I'm glad I did.
Yeah, the stack I ran in all leagues was Cousins Thielen. I know I said on the last show, run with Jefferson because he'll probably be cheaper. But I also said if you could afford Thielen, go with Thielen. And it turned out Jefferson and Thielen were only $100 apart on FanDuel, so I just ran with Thielen.
I ran the Cousins-Jefferson stack. I have a feeling that Jefferson is becoming the guy in that wide receiver core. I do.
Both worked out. I mean,
they did.
Thielen and Jefferson.
They did.
Although Jefferson was slightly better.
I feel like Jefferson is just much more of a dynamic player. He's the boomer bust guy, and I think right now with the way that offense is rolling and that team is going, it's all boom for Justin Jefferson right now. So right now he is the guy in that wide receiver core in my mind.
But speaking of Week 13, though, before we look forward to Week 14, I do have some pressing questions about some performances and just some players overall throughout the first 13 weeks of the season. First couple are about quarterbacks. The first one being what should fantasy owners, specifically Russell Wilson owners, do about Russell Wilson? He's been the QB 15 over the last 4 weeks, and he gets Washington and the Rams during the playoffs. Are you worried if you're a Russell Wilson owner?
Absolutely. I'm without a doubt worried because he just hasn't been the same in the last few weeks. A lot of it has to do with the fact that one, teams are starting to put a lot more pressure on him. Two, teams are starting to finally figure out how to slow down the combination of DK and Lockett. But also his offensive line is absolutely terrible. And they've given up, I can't even tell you how many sacks, just countless amount of sacks. Plus, if you haven't noticed that the offensive game planning has changed for the Seahawks in recent weeks as well. They're much more of that. They've switched back to much more of the what I like to call their championship style offense, which is a very similar offense to what they ran when they won their title, which was a very conservative, control the football, run the ball, set the tone with the run, and have that lead the way, as opposed to allowing Russell Wilson to just go off and do his own thing. So it's much more of a controlled offense, which Russell Wilson isn't thriving in right now, especially with the way that the offensive line is playing. They aren't able to set the tone with the run, and they're just not successful right now. So yes, and with the defenses he's got coming up, I'm absolutely worried about Russell Wilson if he is my guy at quarterback going into the playoffs.
I agree with you. And it's like normally I'm the optimistic type. I'm like, well, yeah, it's been a rough few games for him, and he's had a couple of bad matchups in there, but not all bad matchups. Like he's had matchups he can take advantage of. But I'm always the kind of guy that's like, yeah, let's look forward. I look for him to bounce back because he is Russell Wilson. But then you look and you see he has two of his hardest matchups still to go. I really hope you have an insurance policy, Russell Wilson, and you're not relying on him for the playoffs because, I mean, obviously if he's your only guy, your quarterback situation could be worse. But I am looking ahead if I'm a Russell Wilson owner trying to find some playoff matchups that you can take advantage of the waiver wire.
And you know me, I'm very much if he's the guy that got you there, you roll with him type person. That's I said the same thing about Alvin Kamara, but I can't say the same thing about Russell Wilson right now because the quarterback position is just different. It's one where the busts are really bad. Like Justin Herbert this week, when he busted this week, it was really bad, but could you have gone with a guy that maybe doesn't have the same type of ceiling, but is the better matchup, probably will, have the safer play? Then yes, you could have. They're out there. They are out there. You can go after them, and
you can go like
you're better off
Rivers
playing that. Right.
Right. Philip Rivers, I believe, has the Texans in Week 15. So that's a play you could make on week 15. I know Andy Dalton's got Philly in week 16. It's a little bit riskier, but that's a play you could take in week 16. I mean, there's matchups that you can exploit.
Absolutely,
sure.
and those quarterbacks are likely available. There's guys out there that if you're worried about Russell Wilson putting up a dud, that 8, 10, 12, 14 points, roll with the streaming option, and maybe you go, instead of the 8, 10, 12, 14 points, you get 18, 20, 22 points. That could be the difference between you losing your first playoff matchup and winning your first playoff matchup to get you into the semifinals or the finals, depending on how your playoffs are structured. But absolutely, I'm looking to stream. I'm looking at potential streaming options at quarterback instead of Russell Wilson in the playoffs right now.
Yeah,
until he proves me otherwise.
If we weren't so far past the trade deadline, I'd be saying sell Russell Wilson. But that ship has sailed.
That ship has sailed. Yes.
The next quarterback I want to talk about is Justin Herbert. He's coming off an ugly performance against the Pats, and he wasn't great against Buffalo either. However, he does get Las Vegas and Denver in the playoffs. The Raiders are pretty good matchup. Denver is iffy. Are you going Justin Herbert or Russell Wilson if you had to pick between the two?
I'm absolutely running Justin Herbert. One, he's got the better matchup. Two, I just have more trust in the guy's offense right now. Keenan Allen is still a guy that's going to roll. Hunter Henry's got a great matchup this week. I think Herbert's got the higher ceiling than Russell Wilson in come playoff time just based on matchup. And Herbert up against a Patriots defense. Patriots defense is one of the best in the league. That's a tough matchup no matter who it is. So I'm not really putting too much stock in that one. Yes, the Chargers got blown out, but also Herbert also got back another weapon in the past couple of weeks in Austin Eckler, who's slowly becoming more and more 100%. So that's another reason to believe in Justin Herbert moving forward, because he is so involved in the passing game as well. And it's something that defenses have to account for, which opens things up for guys like Keenan Allen and Hunter Henry in that offense. So I think Herbert will be just fine in the playoffs. In all honesty, he very, very easily could be one of the top receivers or top quarterbacks in the fantasy playoffs as well with the matchups that he's got. So I'm definitely rolling Herbert.
As a Herbert owner, I mean, I'm upset about the last couple performances, but I'm not panicked on Justin Herbert. Like I'm still starting him next week, no question. It's a 2 QB league anyways, but I would still roll him out next week, no question. Like I'm not too worried about it. I definitely take him over Russell Wilson. If you're a Herbert owner, don't start panicking because of the Pats game and the Buffalo game before that.
Absolutely.
Moving on. Corey Davis. Is it time to put respect on his name? He just had a huge week this past week. And in general, since returning from injury in week 7, he's been the wide receiver 6 in half-point PPR. And coming up, he's got the Jags, the Lions, and the Packers.
Absolutely.
How high are you on Corey Davis the rest of the way?
Absolutely, it's time to buy into Corey Davis, and he should be a guy that should be in your lineup week in and week out moving forward. He's got a great match. He's got great matchups for the fantasy playoffs. He's a guy that you can trust. Ryan Tannehill seems to love throwing him the football, and I think he's a little bit of a beneficiary of A.J. Brown emerging as the top guy in that offense outside of Derrick Henry, and the guy that's drawing the primary corners for on the defense. Before, it's been Corey Davis. That's why he's struggled in previous years, but now there's a legit number 1 in A.J. Brown, and Corey Davis is one of the better number 2s, if not one of the best number 2s in the NFL. And in that offense with Ryan Tannehill going guns a-blazing right now and Derrick Henry at peak performance outside of this past week, I absolutely am buying into Corey Davis as one of the top wide receiver 2s in an offense in this league right now, and he will give you wide receiver 1 type numbers against a good matchup. So absolutely I'm buying into Corey Davis right now.
Yeah, I agree. And like, if you just look at 12 targets this past week, I mean, if he gets anywhere near that kind of target share against Jacksonville or against Detroit, that's more than enough to do significant damage against those two defenses. AJ, I do think AJ Brown is still the top dog, but there's been a few games already just these past few weeks where Corey Davis has outperformed him. I don't know if it's the benefit of getting the second, the cornerback 2 on the offense instead of the top corner, or what, but he's performed better than I expected him to this year, and he's a guy that I definitely roll with. And what surprised me about Corey Davis is he's still available in like half of leagues.
He really shouldn't be, because he's seriously been so good the last few weeks.
Yeah.
I absolutely would be if he's available in your league, I'm absolutely trying to grab him. 100%.
I think he's a bona fide wide receiver too, rest of the way.
Oh, top end wide receiver 2 to low end wide receiver 1 the rest of the way. The way he's played in the matchups he's got, Absolutely.
Moving on to
I've said absolutely a lot today.
Yes, you have.
I'm very confident in what I'm saying.
Absolutely confident. Moving on to the other side of the spectrum, Miles Sanders. Is he even startable at this point? He's been pretty bad ever since returning from injury. To be exact, he's been the RB30 over those few weeks. Coming up, he has New Orleans, which is a terrible matchup. Arizona, which is a middle-of-the-road matchup. And then he finishes out with a favorable matchup against Dallas. If you're a Miles Sanders owner, are you even comfortable plugging him into your lineup at this point with the way he's played? Or the opportunities he's even gotten, to be honest with you?
Am I comfortable doing it? No. But do I probably have to? Yes. It's a guy that he's still going to get the opportunities, most likely. That's not a given. Not in that Philly offense. And that offense has been so god-awful that things just have imploded in Eagles land. And now, mind you, with Jalen Hurts coming in at quarterback, if he is going to be starting next week and if there's any kind of extended run with Jalen Hurts, things may change for Miles Sanders for the better. If he is playing better than Carson Wentz, we may see an uptick in Miles Sanders' success. So maybe that is an option, a reason to continue plugging him in your lineup. So I reluctantly will keep him in my lineup right now, regardless of the matchup, because he probably is going to get the opportunity to succeed there.
That's actually where I'm worried is the opportunities. Like, yes, he's the top dog in that backfield, but like, for example, this past week, he saw his lowest snap total of the season at 56% of snaps. Like, I don't know what, like, the team in general is apparently straying from running the ball. Like, he only had 10 carries total.
They got behind real early in that game.
Yeah,
like they struggled seriously. But once Jalen Hurts came into the game, things kind of shifted a little bit. It was a little bit more of a dynamic offense, which I think lends to an uptick in Miles Sanders' usage. They won't be behind and being forced to take Miles Sanders out of the offense as much. So I think if Jalen Hurts continues to be the quarterback there, you can trust Miles Sanders a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not quite there yet with Miles Sanders. I was pretty excited about him coming back from injury, especially considering the matchups that he had in the near term. But the fact that he didn't take advantage of any of them, now he's running into New Orleans and then Arizona, which I think is a better than advertised, or harder than advertised matchup. I am not too confident in trotting out Miles Sanders. You may be able to pop him in on someone as a surprise in Week 16 in a championship game if you make it that far, and have him win you a championship if suddenly he gets his carries back and he gets a really bad Dallas defense. But I don't think he's going to be the guy that you can plug in and let him take you there.
Like I said, I'm reluctantly doing it, and it's more of as a flex play. I'm looking elsewhere at my running back position if possible, but chances are it's probably not possible for you at this point.
Oh yeah, it's hard to pivot at running back.
But also on top of that too, though, I got a question to kind of turn this around on you. Like, if Jalen Hurts is named the starting quarterback moving forward, does that give you any reason to believe or any more reason to believe in Miles Sanders at all? Because I think it does personally, because I think the offense is a little more dynamic, a little more fluid with Jalen Hurts, just from what we saw this past week.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll say a couple of things. One, I'm a believer that it's a fool's game to try to predict predict what's going to happen with the quarterback change. But at the same time, I don't see it getting much worse than what they're doing to Carson Wentz. So I feel pretty comfortable in saying, I think it's a positive for Jalen Hurts to come in, and I think it's a positive impact on both Miles Sanders and the Eagles receivers as well, because the way Carson Wentz has been playing, I think there's nowhere to go but up.
100% agree. Carson Wentz has been terrible, and there was a period of time where he was playing really good football, but he has absolutely fallen off of a table lately, and that offense as a whole is just imploding and god awful. They've given up in that division almost. So I think bringing in Jalen Hurts would do nothing but help the playmakers on that offense. So
yeah. All right, moving on to our last guy here, Kareem Hunt. In the first 4 weeks of the season, when he was sharing the backfield with Nick Chubb, he was the RB7 through that time span. He was an auto start every single week, and then Chubb goes down. He's a top 5 running back. Chubb's back now over the last over the last 4 games since chosen back, Kareem Hunt's been the RB20. His production has decreased dramatically. Is Kareem Hunt no longer an auto start?
I mean, RB20 is still RB2 territory. Like, it's not very back end RB2 territory either. It's still pretty safe RB2. And I'm always comfortable putting in an RB2 as a flex play at the very least. So for that reason, I'll say yes, he's still probably an auto start outside of a couple of games, outside of maybe a couple of bad matchups. I don't know his upcoming schedule. I don't pay attention to the Browns that much. But
Baltimore, the Giants, and the Jets.
The Jets, yes. Giants, yes. Baltimore, maybe not. But either way, I think that there's something going on in Cleveland where they've figured out something with that team because they're absolutely rolling right now.
Yeah.
And I mean rolling in a big way. And they've been doing it without increasing while lowering the usage of a guy like Kareem Hunt and not allowing him to make plays. I think they're going to continue rolling with what they're doing right now, and that gives me cause for concern about Kareem Hunt because that caps his ceiling quite a bit. Yeah. So while I say that even though I will still continue probably playing him in a good matchup or a solid matchup, I don't have high expectations for him. And yes, I am worried about the possible bust because, again, the Browns have figured out something with their offense that is clearly working, and it doesn't involve Kareem Hunt as much as it did before. So I'm very concerned about Kareem Hunt's ceiling, but I still think the floor is better than not startable.
Yeah. I think you make a good point there, especially with the way like you said, the way the Cleveland Browns are playing. I mean, last week, I don't think I've ever seen a better first half from a Cleveland Browns football team in my lifetime.
No, that was incredible.
Last week.
It was incredible.
Albeit their second half, they just pooped the bed, but they still won the game. But yeah, they've been rolling, and there's no reason if it ain't broke, don't fix it, as they say.
Exactly.
So I don't think Kareem Hunt is going, even though up to about week 10, week 11, he was a RB1 on the season. I don't think he's going to reach that point anymore at all this season.
No.
I think at best, if he pops, he's an RB2, but. Yeah, it's not a guy that you're just going to bench altogether, but he might be a flex play most weeks the rest of the way.
Completely agree with that.
Yeah. All right, those are all the questions I have.
I like Q&A sessions. They're fun.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out a little cute little way to frame it, but I'm like, you know what, let's just go right at it.
Let's just get at it. Get after it. It also allows me to flex my fantasy muscles a little bit. I like it.
Yeah.
Now, if you had actually listened to me last week and made a couple of key starts, then you would have fared fairly well. Unfortunately, I did not listen to myself this past week, and I did not fare well. But let's go ahead and move on into our starts and sits of the week. Andrew, if you want to take it away at quarterback, please feel free.
All right. My quarterback start of the week is going to be, this is the obvious one, I think, is Ryan Tannehill against Jacksonville.
Yes.
The Jacksonville pass defense, like I said last week, has imploded, and that's why I had the Kirk Cousins, Thielen, or Jefferson stack going, and that fared really well. Over the last 6 weeks now, Jacksonville's allowing 298 yards, nearly 300 yards per game to the QB position, and 2.3 touchdowns per game. Tannehill threw 4 touchdowns against him in week 2, so I think he should be firing on all cylinders against him this week.
I've also got Ryan Tannehill going this week, and the Jags are absolutely terrible against quarterbacks. They give up a ton of points, a ton of yards. And Ryan Tannehill, who put up a pretty solid week this past week, I think is going to keep it rolling. The Titans are really fighting for playoff chances now, are really fighting for that division. So I think that they're going to come out rolling against a bad Jags team and really make them pay. And I think Ryan Tannehill is looking to make a statement this week. So I would absolutely be running Tannehill. I'd be running A.J. Brown, and I'd be running Corey Davis.
Yep, exactly. My next start, Taysom Hill. Believe it or not.
Okay.
Taysom Hill is at the 230 passing yard mark in 2 of his 3 starts.
Also threw his first touchdown of his career and had 2 of them.
Albeit all this production's coming against the Falcons, so it's
very
big asterisk.
Very true.
But on paper, he's going against the Eagles, and on paper, that looks like a daunting matchup because the Eagles are actually top 10 in fantasy points allowed to the quarterback position, as in like the top 10 best. But if you dive a little deeper into those numbers, you'll see a bit of a different story because they've only faced 4 top 15 quarterbacks in the season. That's if you include Joe Burrow, who was top 15 before a season-ending injury. I'm including Joe Burrow, given the benefit of the doubt here. And to those 4 quarterbacks, they've allowed an average of 276 yards and 2.2 touchdowns per game. That's quite different than what they're allowing over the course of the season. Taysom Hill is actually the QB 6 through 3 weeks. And, not to mention the Eagles have allowed the second most rushing yards to the position. So I think I'm going to roll with Taysom Hill one last time here.
I don't hate it. I don't necessarily love it either. I think that the way that the game flow works with the Eagles is your offense doesn't see the field that much. And by that, I mean it's because your defense grabs a lot of turnovers and scores touchdowns. And you're probably going to be playing out ahead, and that means a lot of running game. So I don't love it for that reason. However, Taysom Hill against the Eagles could end up panning out. Now, my start of this week, and this is I went a little bit different here, but I went Matt Ryan going up against the Chargers. And the Chargers, for the most part, have been a solid defense. However, lately, they've just absolutely fallen off a table to where they've now dropped into the bottom 10 in giving up points, or top 10 in giving up points, I guess, if you want to phrase it that way, to quarterbacks in fantasy. They're 10th right now, and if you've watched them the last few weeks, they just have not done a damn thing, defensively or offensively, and that's really hurt them in what they've played. And I think Matt Ryan, who still has a very dynamic offense, has a big chance this week to put up some big points, and I think he's going to. So I like Matt Ryan up against the Chargers this week.
I'm going with a revenge game for my third start of the week at quarterback. I'm going Andy Dalton against Cincinnati.
All right.
The Bengals defense, this is an interesting story with the Bengals defense because they actually started off really strong against opposing QBs. They were only allowing they only allowed one QB to throw for more than 225 yards in their first 5 games. They were shutting down QBs. But since then, only one QB has thrown for less than 225 yards. During that span, they've actually allowed nearly 20 fantasy points per game at the position, which leaves them flirting with bottom 5 in the league. Tua just threw for 300 yards against them, which is a career high for the rookie. Dalton has weapons and, not to mention, the motivation to expose this Bengals secondary this week. So I like the revenge game here. He's going to be dirt cheap. So he's our start of the week for me.
That's an interesting streaming play as well as an interesting DFS play if you want to go real cheap at quarterback. I like it.
Yeah.
Bengals defense is not good.
No.
Moving on to running backs here.
Oh, you don't have any sits at quarterback?
Oh, sorry. Sits at quarterback. I've got Josh Allen going up against the Steelers. The Pittsburgh defense is the real deal. They have been all year. They're looking to go 16-0. And they're not going to let the Bills get in their way. At least I would hope not. Well, I mean, the Bills are a good team, so we'll see. But either way, I think Josh Allen's got a tough matchup going up against Pittsburgh. They don't allow points at all to quarterbacks. They're actually the best in the league at stopping quarterbacks. So I think Josh Allen's in for a tough week.
Whoa. I like that one. I'm not going to play him. I'll tell you that much. My sit of the week is going to be Cam Newton against the Rams. I'm just continuing the weekly tradition of sitting whatever QB plays the Rams this week. So they do what they did to Russell Wilson a few weeks ago and hold Cam Newton to 0 touchdowns and multiple turnovers? Or will Cam Newton find a way to pull through like Kyler Murray in this past week and score 3 touchdowns somehow? Considering the Rams prevented Murray from getting anything done with his legs, and they haven't a lot of rushing touchdown to QB since week 5, and that's kind of where all of Cam Newton's production comes from because he hasn't had more than 1 passing touchdown in a game this season. I'm leaning the former, and I'm sitting Cam this week.
I've also got Cam Newton as a sit, and I feel like I cheated this week because I just picked the 2 best defenses against quarterback. Pittsburgh first, Rams second best against quarterbacks in fantasy. Cam Newton, I think, kind of falls back to earth quite a bit and kind of hits the ground real hard against the Rams. Like, I expect a straight-up dud week from Cam Newton. I'm calling single digits out of him this week. The Rams are going to shut them down entirely, and Cam's going to struggle in a big way because I don't think his receivers are going to be open at all against that Rams secondary, and there is not very much opportunity for him to run against the Rams either.
Not at all.
Not a good matchup for him.
So we've won to running backs. My first running back start of the week, if he plays, is DeAndre Swift against Green Bay. Because if he plays, it's a great matchup for him. The Packers are still the second worst rushing defense in the league. And I'll be honest, I'm not discouraged by Miles Sanders' lack of production against them because, like I said earlier, he had his lowest snap total of the season. They didn't let him play. If he doesn't go, however, if DeAndre Swift doesn't play, I am actually, unlike what I've said in previous weeks, I'm comfortable pivoting AP, who has 4 touchdowns over the last 2 games. So if anything, I think AP will find the end zone against this Packers defense, but I like DeAndre Swift as long as he plays.
I was going to ask you if Swift doesn't play because, in all honesty, from reports that I've heard, Swift may be done for the year. He's dealing with some concussion issues, and now, mind you, that's entirely me speculating.
Yeah,
but he is dealing with some concussion issues, and where the Lions are, I know they're fighting for a playoff spot. They are only a game out of the wild card, believe it or not.
It's insane to me.
I know. Well, I mean, that's what happens when you got extra wild card spots. But from what I've heard, he just isn't himself. He's not right. And when you're dealing with a traumatic head injury, especially with a rookie, that's not something you really want to mess with. So yeah. I love the Swift matchup up against the Packers. However, I am also looking at pivoting to AP here if Swift doesn't go, because he has been really successful in short yardage, and I think the Lions are going to have opportunity this week to do that. But my start of the week at running back is actually the other side of the ball there. I'm going Aaron Jones up against the Lions. And yes, I know, easy. Lions are worse in the league against running backs, no question. But I also am saying this because it seems like Aaron Jones has bounced back quite a bit since he's come back from injury. He finally got his legs underneath him and he's got his stride going. He had a good week this week, and I think that's going to continue this week up against the Lions.
My next start of the week is going to be David Montgomery against Houston. We're
just lockstep this week, let me tell you.
Oh, yeah. Because, honestly, Montgomery's been really productive these last couple of weeks. He's taken advantage of 2 very favorable matchups on his way to 254 total yards and 3 touchdowns. He's faced he gets to face 2 of the 3 worst run defenses in the league, and now he gets to face a third, all in a row. The Dave Montgomery train keeps on rolling this week against Houston.
When I said we're in lockstep this week, I've also got David Montgomery going up against the Texans. Texans are god-awful against the run. Teams just continue to run successfully against them, and the Bears' offense is really going to have to run through him this week because quarterback play is putrid for the Bears, and Dave Montgomery has been the lone successful option on that offense for the Bears this year, or at least in recent weeks. So I think David Montgomery is going to have a big week up against the Texans.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any other starts before we get to?
I do not. We can pivot over to sets.
Dalvin Cook against Tampa is my slit/fade of the week because it's Dalvin Cook.
I would say fade,
but here's the reason. Not only is Tampa not allowed a 100-yard rusher yet this season, they've yet to even allow a 90-yard rusher, and that's having faced Kamara twice, Aaron Jones, CMC when he was healthy, and Josh Jacobs. It's a pretty daunting group of running backs. Last time I made Dalvin Cook a sit/fade, he only managed 65 yards against the Seahawks, although he did manage to get in the end zone one time, which kind of saved his day a little bit. But I think that's going to be right around what you're looking at with Dalvin Cook this week, which is certainly not worth the $10,000 price tag, or right around there is probably what he's going to be in FanDuel. So I'm staying away.
I absolutely agree with you. He's not one of my sits, but I'm going to piggyback off that. And I actually have a question for you. Are you at all worried about Dalvin Cook going into the playoffs, going into the fantasy playoffs? And the reason, and now I know you're going to say, or you're probably asking out there, why would you be worried about him? He just had 180 total yards in between the run and the pass, and he's putting up points, and he just had a good week. But the week prior, he really didn't. Mm-hmm. I've heard reports that since his ankle injury, and also since in recent weeks, his own offensive coordinator has come out and said he's just not right. He just is. He's beat up. He's banged up. This isn't the same Dalvin Cook we saw early in the year. He's tired. And this past week, he really didn't get going until real late in this game. Are you at all worried about Dalvin Cook in the playoffs? Like, could there be a potential dud waiting in the works with him?
A potential dud? I think he could be an overall dud. I mean, you look at his remaining schedule. Like, he's got Tampa this week, then Chicago, then New Orleans. Tampa and New Orleans are top 3 defenses against the running back. Chicago's not far behind at 6. I do think the one he could maybe do well in the Chicago because divisional matchup, you never know how that's going to go. But I don't like at Tampa or at New Orleans. This could get ugly for Dalvin Cook. If he's been the soul of your team, I'd be worried.
Yikes. Because he is the soul of my team. I am honestly worried, though, because when I saw the report that his own coach is saying he's banged up, he's not 100%, he just isn't right, that scared the hell out of me. And then I see Alexander Madison went down. I'm like, oh, God, this is not good. So I absolutely am worried about Dalvin Cook. But my sit of the week this week is Austin Eckler going up against the Falcons. The Falcons are 30th or third best at stopping the run. And while they give up a ton of points through the air and a ton of yards, they don't give up a lot on the ground. And while Eckler does have the pass catching opportunities, he still just doesn't seem like he's 100% there yet. He's still trying to get his legs underneath him. And usually by the third, fourth week, he's back. But I think game flow is going to force the Chargers to throw the ball a lot up against the Falcons, because I think the Falcons offense is going to be rolling this week. So I think the Chargers are going to have to look at receivers. And also, I think the receivers and tight ends have a better matchup opportunity than Austin Eckler does this week. So I'm looking at the Chargers quarterback and receivers more than I am the running back.
Yeah, after what he did to my FanDuel lineup, I'm not going back his way this week either way. Moving on to wide receivers.
I do have another sit, actually.
Go for it.
Alvin Kamara up against the Eagles.
Woo!
Now, you say, why would you ever sit Alvin Kamara? And mind you, this is more of a fade or a buyer beware. And the reason is because, the Eagles aren't necessarily one of the best teams in the league at stopping running backs. I think they're 11th, the 11th best at stopping backs in fantasy. The reason I'm worried about him is because he's become very one-dimensional in that Saints offense, to where he's been taken out of the passing game entirely. Yep. And when you look at an Eagles run defense who has been pretty good at stopping the run, and you make a one-dimensional Alvin Kamara, I'm not entirely sold on him being the guy. And Latavius Murray's really come up as a big option in that backfield as well when it comes to running the football. So even out-touching him in a game or two. So Alvin Kamara, albeit had a solid week this week, I am worried about him up against the Eagles just because he is so one-dimensional now. And while he is the most elite runner on that team, they do tend to wrinkle in Latavius Murray a lot. And without him having the pass-catching opportunities, I'm not entirely on the train of Alvin Kamara, even though I did say last week you roll with him, which I still do. I'm just not as excited about it.
Alvin Kamara last week has been that was a mystery to me. Like, what I don't understand. Like, it doesn't make sense that he did well to me, because he's going against a good run defense in Atlanta and not getting any passing work. The fact that he managed 88 yards, which was a season high for him, by the way, it made no. I thought for sure.
Was
Alvin
that really
Kamara
a season high for Alvin Kamara?
Yeah, 88 yards, like season high rushing yards. Yeah. But yeah, since Taysom Hill has taken over at quarterback, I believe Alvin Kamara has been the running back 14. So he's not been RB1, but he's still a guy that could take advantage of bad matchups. And Philly, that's one I could see it. I'll say this: I'm not going to doubt him after I thought I was going to put up a dud against Atlanta. He did it, so I don't think I'm going to doubt him anymore.
I mean, I'm not saying he's going to straight up put up a dud against Philly, because Philly is a tough matchup for running backs. They're one of the top 11 teams against running backs, but it's not a great matchup when the guy doesn't really seem to you've taken away what is at least 50% of his offensive production.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I just I'm scared now.
Yeah.
I'm not going Kamara's way by any means this week.
He was real cheap this week.
With Taysom Hill under center in general, I do not look Kamara's way. That's just how I look at it.
Moving on to receivers here. I went the wide receiver pairs for my starts this week. I went Mike Evans and Chris Godwin going up against the Vikings. Play them both. Start them both. I would say go who probably is cheaper in DFS, but you can comfortably start either one of them this week up against the Vikings. Vikings are 12th worst in the league at giving up points to wide receivers, and I think this one's going to be a shootout because the Vikings offense has really been guns a-blazing as well. So I think the Bucs are going to be forced to throw the football quite a bit, and I think both guys will be beneficiaries because the Bucs are going to spread the ball around. The Viking secondary isn't really going to stop them, so I don't think they match up. I don't think the Viking secondary's got the talent to be able to slow down a Mike Evans, Chris Godwin combination. So I think they're going to be receptions galore and probably touchdowns galore.
So something tells me my next start here is going to be part of one of your wide receiver pairs. I'm going Corey Davis against Jacksonville. The aforementioned Corey Davis. The Jags have allowed a wide receiver to go for 100 yards in 8 straight weeks now. This is the same team that I recommend you can start either Jefferson or Thielen against, and I'd recommend Jefferson on the show. But I like both Davis, just like that. I like both Davis and A.J. Brown this week. But again, similar to what I talked about last week, I tend to roll who's going to be the cheaper of the two, and I think Corey Davis, if history is any indicator, will be considerably cheaper than A.J. Brown. So he's the guy I roll with this week.
I do have Corey Davis in one of my starts. You pretty much said it all, though. Corey Davis has been on a tear lately, and the Jags defense can't stop anybody. I would absolutely love the stack of Ryan Tannehill, Corey Davis, or A.J. Brown this week.
No,
but
this has to be a record, right? 8 straight weeks of allowing 100-yard receivers.
I would imagine.
Like I don't think I've ever seen that.
I do have a different one, though.
Okay.
I have another pairing of... I'm starting Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf going up against the Jets this week. Jets are bottom 10 in the league at giving up points to receivers. And I'm saying that this week for the Seahawks is a get-right revenge tour type game for Seattle. They need to get things right in a big way if they want to go take that NFC West title and get into the playoffs successfully and be a threat. And I think this is the game where it happens. Really soft matchup with an opportunity to really be successful. And Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf are both going to be given the opportunity to be successful. And I think Russell Wilson also has a get right game. I think they come out guns ablazing, don't take the foot off the gas until they know they've righted the ship in that offense. So I think both these guys are going to have a big week.
My next guy is CeeDee Lamb against Cincinnati. In weeks 6 through 10, the Bengals actually had a stretch where they were allowing 4 straight games of 4 straight 100-yard games to receivers. And these games came courtesy of Marcus Johnson, Rashard Higgins, Deontay Johnson, Corey Davis. None of these guys are number 1 receivers on their respective teams. So I'm just going to go with that. I'm going to run with CeeDee Lamb over Amari Cooper, and I'm going to attack the Bengals defense this week with him. I've been loving attacking this defense, and this is my weapon for this week.
I like it. Moving on to sits.
Yes.
I'm sitting Brandon Cooks going up against the Bears. Bears are second best in the league at stopping receivers, and I have just a feeling that the Bears are going to be paying extra attention to Brandon Cooks this week. And the reason being is, well, he's really the only real threat out wide for the Texans. So I think that he's the guy that they're really going to zero in on and not allow him to get open and force them to beat that Bears defense with somebody else. So I think Brandon Cooks is going to have a very frustrating day up against the Bears defense.
I agree with you. And although I do think Kiki Kuti had a nice game last week, and I think he could end up being like a second threat, but I just don't think Brandon Cooks is the number 1 guy, and going against a defense like Chicago, it's going to be tough. But my sit of the week is DJ Moore against Denver. Over the last 4 weeks, the Broncos have quietly been the second best defense against wide receivers. They've only allowed an average of 11.9 fantasy points per game in the position, and they've only allowed 1 touchdown over that span as well. And the most impressive part to me is this came against guys like Tyreek Hill, Michael Thomas, Devontae Parker. I mean, they just held Tyreek to 58 yards and no touchdowns. I think DJ Moore, who's normally locked in as wide receiver too, is not on the radar this week.
I don't disagree at all, actually. It could be a pretty tough week and honestly, the Panthers receivers have kind of been sneaky fun DFS plays for me this year because they're fairly inexpensive and they tend to actually be halfway decent. But my next sit of the week is actually, I'm sitting Steelers wideouts up against the Bills. The Bills are 26th in the league at giving up points to wide receivers, and so that calculates to what? 7th best, I think? So they're top 10 against giving up points to receivers. And the Steelers wideouts, I think, are going to struggle up against Buffalo. I think that this game probably is going to be a little bit of a war of attrition against 2 teams that are destined for the playoffs, and the Steelers want to keep things rolling, and I think they're going to try to keep things under wraps in this game. So I don't, and also I think they're going to try to spread the ball around quite a bit against that tough Bills D. So I would watch out for Steelers wideouts this week.
Question.
Yeah.
Would that make Ben Roethlisberger a sit by proxy?
Yeah, you could probably make that argument. Yeah. I trust Big Ben more than I trust Steelers receivers, and the reason is because I feel like in Big Ben's case, what helps him is the opportunity to spread the ball around successfully versus Steelers wideouts when the ball is spread around, that doesn't lend to success.
Yeah.
So I think Big Ben's got the opportunity, more of an opportunity to succeed than than an individual Steelers wideout does this week.
Okay. I can get behind that. Moving on to tight ends. I'm going to go TJ Hawkinson against Green Bay. Now, normally I wouldn't put a top 5 tight end as my start, but there's a reason I'm making an exception this week, and that's because on the season, Green Bay is a top 5 defense against tight ends, and they're only allowing an average of 46.
We didn't even start tight ends.
Yeah, this is where we are. I thought you have another sit, a wide receiver?
Oh, no. Sorry.
Yeah.
You
he is a
confused
start
me for a second. Okay.
Yeah. I'm saying the reason I'm putting TJ Hawkinson, despite the fact that he's a top 5 tight end, is because I feel it's an odd start to make. Like it's a direction a lot of people aren't going to go, which is why I want to highlight it. Because of the fact that Green Bay is a top 5 defense against tight ends, again only allowing 46 yards to the position, which again on paper looks like a bad matchup for Hawk, but I'm telling you it's not the case. This is because the Packers have only faced 2 top 12 tight ends on the season with Hawk and Gronk. And Hawk went for 68 yards against him in week 2. Gronk went for 72 and a touchdown in week 6, which is a week the Packers are coming off a bye, by the way. Under new interim head coach Darren Bevel, Hawk instantly was more involved in the offense too. So he saw this last game. He saw his second highest target share and yardage totals on the season while tying his career high in catches. So I think Hawk is trending up, and I don't think the Packers are actually that good against tight ends. So where most people are going to shy away from this matchup, I'm attacking you with a full head of steam. I think he exceeds his week 2 production in this matchup.
I'm not as high on Hawk as you are. I still think the Packers are a really good defense against tight ends. I know they haven't faced a really, really good tight end for the most part. Hawk had a solid but not great week against them earlier on in the year. And that was that with Kenny Galladay in the lineup?
No, that was also without Kenny Galladay.
Okay. I expect kind of similar is what we saw for Hawk earlier in the year against the Packers. And the reason is because this offense really doesn't lend itself to change all that much, because this is still Darrell Bevel's offense then, and it's still Darrell Bevel's offense now. And if Kenny Galladay's in the lineup, I expect to see a lot of the targets to go towards him as opposed to towards Hawk. So I'm not as high on Hawk as you may be. I don't think he's a sit by any means, because, again, he's a top 5 tight end, and what he brings to the table in terms of target share, that's something you can't sit any given week. But I am not as high on Hawk just because of the reasons that the Packers defense is good. Plus, if Kenny Galladay plays, I think target share is going to go down for Hawk.
There is a risk if Kenny Galladay plays, but we'll see. We haven't heard anything in that.
No, we haven't. Also, if he doesn't play, I am a little worried about the Packers kind of really zeroing in on Hawk, because he really has stepped up as the guy. But my start of the week at tight end is going to be Hunter Henry up against the Falcons. I know the Chargers had a really bad week this past week, but I think this is a get-right game for that Chargers offense. I've said it all along, and I'm going to continue saying it. I think Justin Herbert has a big week, and I think Henry is a big reason why. The Falcons are the worst team in the league against tight ends. They seemingly give up points all over the place to tight ends, and I think Hunter Henry has a big one up against them this week.
Yeah. My next start of the week, Dalton Schultz against Cincinnati. Since week 5, the Bengals have been the second worst team against tight ends, allowing 12.7 fantasy points per game in FanDuel scoring. And honestly, this defense has turned into a gold mine for opposing tight ends. I recommend starting tight ends against them over the last 2 weeks now. Ingram, and he finished with 129 receiving, and Mike Gesicki last week, who finished with 89 yards and touchdown this past week. I'm going for the hat trick with Dalton Schultz here.
You really love to pick on the Bengals defense.
I do.
My start of the week is moving over towards Hayden Hurst against the Chargers. I'm going with both tight ends in this matchup. I think both be successful. Chargers are third worst in the league. They give up a lot of points to tight ends, and I think that continues with Hayden Hurst. I think there's going to be a lot of room for Hurst to operate. The Chargers defense has not been good in recent weeks, and their play against tight ends is a big reason why. So I'm very hesitant, or I'm very, very excited about the possibility of Hayden Hurst having a big week up against Chargers.
Yeah. Any other starts?
No, I do have one sit, though.
I have a couple sits as well.
Okay,
all right, so
take it away.
Then. I'm going to go with the pair of Goddard and Ertz to start against New Orleans.
That's my sit.
All right, I'll give it to you. I'll go to the other one. Eric Ebron against Buffalo. Now, against tight ends this season, the Bills' defense they've basically been the fantasy equivalent of Two-Face. Through weeks 1 through 6, they were terrible. They were allowing 16.8 fantasy points per game in the position. They were bottom 3 defense in the league against tight ends. But then since then, in weeks 7 through 13, it's been completely different. They've only allowed 6.6 fantasy points to the position, and they've been a borderline top 10 defense against tight ends. They haven't even allowed a single tight end touchdown during that span of weeks 7 through 13. So their season-long totals, like taken as a whole, it still shows as an extremely favorable matchup. But if you actually look at the recent performance, it makes me think twice about spending up for Ebron this week. I think you're going to see a lot of analysts try to recommend Ebron against Buffalo. Don't fall for that trap.
I like when you do your homework. My set of the week, as I just mentioned, is the duo of Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. And the reason is because, well, the Saints defense is very stingy against tight ends. And also, I think neither one is really going to be the guy at tight end this week, because you're starting to see Zach Ertz phased into this offense more and more as he comes back from injury. We saw him a little bit last week. I think you see a little bit more of a jump this week. So it's really not going to be one or the other. It's just neither one is going to have the bulk of the opportunity. And mix that with the fact that the Saints defense is very good against tight ends. I don't think either one of them is successful this week.
Yeah, I think very good is even an understatement. I mean, 2.6 fantasy points per game to the position. That's insane. Yeah. That's since week 7. And I just want to add some color to that and say that they've only allowed an average of 19.1 yards per game over that span and 0 touchdowns. That's pretty good. That's going against, in that time span, which is only like 6 games. They faced 4 top 12 tight ends during that span. That's Gronk, Hayden Hurst twice, and Noah Fant. So, yeah, I agree with you. I say bench Goddard, and I guess if you have urged, keep him on your bench because you weren't starting him anyways.
Right. Moving on to defenses here, and these are streaming defenses, mind you. This is not defenses I would put in the top 12, but they'll probably be pretty cheap. I'm going with the Panthers up against the Broncos this week.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because the Broncos actually give up the most points to defenses in the league. So the Panthers may be a little bit more expensive for that reason. But Panthers defense, albeit against the run, is very bad. But I'm not really scared of the Broncos rushing attack at all. And the Broncos also are giving up a ton of points. They're turning the ball over like crazy. So I think the Panthers will be a pretty damn good play.
I'm going to go, and I'm kind of basing this off I'm basing the fact, or I'm basing my guess that they're going to be cheap based on what they were last week. New England against the Rams. New England was only 3,700 on FanDuel this past week. If you look at where they are on the season as a DST, they're 15th on the season, and that's in FanDuel scoring. So 3,700 against this past week, and they shut out the Chargers on their way to a massive, massive fantasy output. This week they do face the Rams, who's an offense they're allowing since week 7. They've been a top 5 matchup against opposing DSTs, allowing about 10 fantasy points per game during that span. So I don't know exactly where the Patriots value will fall this week, but if it's anywhere near what it was last week, I'm talking even like up to like 4,200, I'll plug them in without hesitation.
Absolutely. That actually was my other one. And the Rams offense on paper looks really good, but it just, they give up too many points to defenses. And they've, like you mentioned, they are top 5 in giving up points to defenses. They actually are number 5 this season, not just in the past 7 weeks. So they give up a lot of points to DSTs, and I think the Patriots, who are a very good DST, I think they've got a really good opportunity this week.
Mm-hmm. I agree. By the way, I want to add a quick disclaimer. I forgot to mention this in the wide receiver section. I just wanted to say, don't be afraid of using Atlanta's wide receivers against the Chargers, because I know they've been They look like a tough matchup on paper, but they haven't faced anybody. So if you got them, play them. Also, on top of that, the Chargers defense has been absolutely putrid the last few weeks. So I am not scared of putting Falcons receivers against the Chargers. That's for sure. I think Chargers defense is just falling off the table, and I've kind of stressed that during this episode. And I know I didn't bring up the Falcons receivers, but their defense really has fallen off the table, and I think you can take advantage of that right now. Yeah, because they're still technically they're number 6, I think, on the season against wide receivers, but that's like 6 and falling. So yeah, right, and falling fast, like real fast. But anyways, though, anything else to add, or we good? Good luck this week. Yeah, thank you. I need it. It's been a bad week. I hope to win some money. Yeah.
Anyways, though, guys, good luck to you all, and Andrew, good luck to you as well. Just not in the league against me. But we will catch you guys next week. Hope you enjoyed. Follow us on Twitter at RealFanReport. And I'm kind of sad the football season's coming to an end. Like,
Yeah.
I know we're not quite there yet, but we're getting close.
We're getting close.
And it sucks. I longed for football, and now I feel like it's just gone by so quickly.
Yeah.
But anyways, guys, we'll catch you next week. Thank you again. Have a good one. Peace out.
Peace.